this up
So everybody can hear me. Ooh, look, what a nice audience. Hello. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm Shirley Willis, and my narrative poem tonight is from a collection I call God Sparks, Finding the Divine in Ordinary People. Some of you will actually recognize Joe. Joe. In years past, Joe was the champion class yapper in a class about dialogue. His own favorite book, the revenge book he'd written in retaliation for having to read the vagina monologues in an earlier class, was titled The Penis Monologue. He never conformed his style to syllabi not being his idea of creation in creative writing or anything else. The dialogue class parsed quotes for characters, though I don't remember Joe's characters talking much. He was the go-to writer for hard sex with soft women and fast sex, bang bang like bullets with slow men, duped and looped in by trans ladyboys and bizarro plots. Or in those arms of gorgeous dames, harvesting not only income, but organs, his, just not the one he kept for his next story. He was in the studhood of Italian stallion glory. We women in his writers group teased at his ego and rolled eyes and louder sighs. No woman wants that kind of sex, Joe. But who knows, we didn't, being his Madonna types and not his storied whores. Joe hiked and rafted and ziplined, racing to empty full-bucketed lists with two-fisted gusto, lest he go unadventured. Always another mountain, another vista, and he wrote like a racehorse just out to finish in the lineup of life. Poetry spilled, prose thrilled, and Joe, he brashed and provoked and joked offside about too many purposely misunderstood issues, evoking his arms up opposition to every categorization not his own design. And to every politician's word picked up or dropped, he sneered, I don't vote, I'm an ex-con of the finest kind. I'm the devil's own advocate, said like other Italians I've known. I own the bigotry in my first impression, as Joe owned his, mine, one person at a time, in this case Joe, and Joe grouping using epithets, wop, jab, wetback, kike, instead of adjectives for divergence of any kind, but not unkind. And always smiling, our Joe. For years, he wrote the same imaginary women, ones he'd never meet. And who could these Madonna whore incarnations, haunted and hunted by Joe's real men, be? As always, the protagonist was really him, whether hero or the most surprised victim. Joe claimed illiteracy while reading further into Murakami's IQ 84 than anyone I know, discussing plot with offhanded diffidence and unfeigned humility. This guy's great, read him, he'd say. Joe was all that, and morphed further, his body declining, his mind unbinding, and, it was noticed, fabricating a more flexible and softer lining for his box of ideas. Years passed. Joe mellowed. Or was it discovery? He went to Shakespeare in the Pines, went home, pulled out chairs, opened doors, made sure you had coffee or water or ice cream if he had ice cream. He wrote more bizarros, made art, splashing out paint in wallops of Pollock and Kandinsky and Klemt's Tree of Life in shimmering patina, then bounced rounded visual thoughts, a balloon print capture of fall-blown colors, leaves, and flight. What do you see, he'd ask. I was almost never right. Later, Joe at a book sale asking, well, how much money do you have? Of a little girl fingering his poetry book. $1, she said, turning to leave, knowing it wasn't enough. Today, he called after her, don't go. Today, $1's exactly the Price is Right show. My eyebrows shot up in horror. So he said to her, now have your dad or your mom read this with you. Said because the book was ages too old, with more than a little bit of libido. To me, he said, she'll grow up one day. She'll need to know this stuff. Mollifying me, shrugging, enabling the little girl to be the most important person at the table. She crowed, I have a poetry book, I have a poetry book. While Joe, sipping his well-flasked beer, was saying, book sales are a waste of time. For my writing, he'd always wanted a murder spliced into my staid school stories. It's boring, he said, nobody will read it. And was mostly right. Not helpfully, but fun, he urged. Kill off that principal or the mean one, the other teacher. Better yet, have Jeremiah the brat do it. And save him on a technicality. The reality of which I thought was dumb. Wouldn't it be? And oh, how he and Bob, the other male in our group, sparred and fought, the only men in a den of women, tolerant of Joe, but not Bob the professor, who should have held his temper better, being solidly doctored and sternly Anglo-Wasp, but liberal-leaning. Neither he nor Joe ever letting go of one hiccup or drop of testosterone. Still, Joe kept inviting him back, going to Bob's wife's funeral, arranging lunch for Bob's birthday. In that fecundest of friend groups, Joe was experimental about everything except loyalty and love. More years sang by, and sometime before or during the first pandemic wave, Joe spit into a 23andMe tube. And gobsmacked this, he was barely Italian after all, but Jewish, a sect of those he holds squarely as intellectuals. Jump forward. Joe fashions himself as a Jewish daddy now, the nurturer, though that was always there. Now his frailing body robust his spirit with broad strokes, now with even broader self-deprecation, now a charm often lost on others, but not on those he loves and who love him back. More years later, and we say, those of us often gathered to his salons, Joe's the go-to daddy of writing, of discussion, of poor art. Poor, not in quality, but with found stuff, with which even the poor can measure out a treasure. Art so named because it's formed of bits and pieces and scraps of life's little gasps of hope and aspiration and despair, or the fair floss of loss and redemption in a clock found anew. Whatever you bring, whatever its meekness, oldness, or boldness, everything enfolded, celebrated in the tabernacle of Joe's finest art. The how and why of crashing past the cracks in syllabi. Some of you know Joe.